Hi, my name is Ken, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Ken.
This one I can move. This one I'm not so sure. I know. I thought that. I thought with Victoria, it'll be they're not hearing. They're with me. They won't be able to see me. That doesn't. We'll have to get an official out here. Thank you. And then I think this is lovely, but I think I have to take. It's tickling my face and. Just a little too many hallucinogenics in the past there. I don't want to be like, I guess I can sit down now, and you know that I've now identified and found my people. Let me move this right over here, too. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for, is that better? Is that all right? Okay, great. Thank you very much for having me. I want to thank the committee for inviting me to be here, to be back here. I was here in Oakland about 10 years ago, I think, maybe. And it's nice to be asked back. And I want to thank Joe and Penny for looking out for me, and just everybody for putting on really a terrific weekend. And I want to thank my sister Brianna, back there somewhere. There she is. For coming up from Santa Cruz and meeting me at the airport. And that's been a terrific gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. She is just fantastic. She really is. She got up at 7:30 this morning and went down to the gym and did the stair stepper and ironed my skirt. And we have a really good relationship. And I just really, the longer she's sober, the more, this program just amazes me the way I see it work in people's lives. And it's definitely alive and well in her life. And I thank my friends Rich and Arlene for being here also. And it's just nice to be here. I guess I should, I am going to tell in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. And I went to, we were at the H&I meeting earlier this afternoon, and that was really a terrific meeting. And I was just thinking, and everybody on that panel had double-digit sobriety, a lot of years of sobriety, and they also had some other things in common. They had a home group, and they had a sponsor, and they were involved in service. And I have those things as well, and I do that because those are the things that keep me in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date is September 24th, 1985, and my sponsor is a woman named Marion W. She's going to celebrate 40 years of sobriety this year, and I want to welcome you if you're new here, if we have any new people here. I welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would like you to know, if you haven't figured out already, that there's absolutely something extraordinary about what you are sitting in. AA works, and it works well. There's just no doubt about that. And if I was standing here alone, sober 18 years, that's a long time between cocktails for somebody like me. It really is. And I know that AA works. And I also know that each one of you has a remarkable story. I mean, we should not look like this. We should not be laughing like this. We shouldn't have the light in our eyes that we have. We shouldn't smell like this. None of the above. I mean, anybody could walk by and peek in, and we could be Amway. We could be the Kiwanis Club. They'd never know. And that lets me know that AA works. There's a couple other things. Joe called me to ask me to do this quite some time ago. And he said he would be here, and I said I would be here, and we were both here. There were some arrangements that had to be made, and those arrangements were made, and I showed up, and he was here, and putting this on takes. We're people. I came in here certainly on a lot of wasted opportunities and broken promises and things I'd flaked out on, and I can't show up for anything. Yet, here I am, and I am very, very grateful for the life that you have given me. This is kind of I really identified with somebody on the H&I panel who she said, that she really was basically mute for her first couple of years in the program, never talked or anything, and now you can't shut her up, and that's kind of me also. But it just seems like whatever it is, I have two really, many, many fears. The Alcoholics Driven by 100 Forms of Fear, our book says, but a couple of those are speaking and flying, but I'm just really glad that I remember the first time that it was made clear to me that I was going to participate in my home group. I got sober in the Steps to Freedom group in Honolulu Hawaii, and nobody said, well, when you feel up to it, would you please lead the meeting and share, or when you feel that you're ready. And I'm really glad someone just came to me and it was announced to me, next week, step 2, you're it. And I thank God for that, because I would still be sitting out there, no, I'm not quite ready yet. I'm still just a little uncomfortable. I need a little more self-care maybe, and I'm really grateful, that a loving God put what I thought were mean people, in my life, because my sponsor, I heard my sponsor just give a terrific talk last week, Monday Night Ohio, and she said that her method, and we're very similar, she was just terrified of everything, and she would just always burst into tears, and then people would say, it's okay, and you don't have to do it, and whatever it was, that it always worked for her. And the first time she was asked to read chapter 5, she got up there and she burst into tears, and she was just sure that one of these AA people would come and take her down from the podium and say it's okay, and nobody did, and and she had to get through it, and her life changed. Her life began to change, because you just keep on stepping, and I'm very grateful for that, because when I begin to live according to my fears, that's not living at all. I'm kind of scattered today. I was just thinking also when I was listening to some of the H&I speakers, just all the different ways that, we are people who normally would not mix, and all the different things that happen here. And I was telling my sister this story last night, that a friend of mine from my old home group that lives in Jerusalem, he's an Orthodox Jew, and he was visiting, and he came to my home group, and I met him there, and it was Ash Wednesday, and I'm a Catholic, and so I'd been to Mass and had, the big ashen cross on my head, and he's here with his long beard and his yarmulke and his locks and the whole thing, and we went to the meeting, and then, and then we went to another AA member's restaurant, a Persian restaurant, so it's all Arabs. We went over to Hamid's to have some Persian food after the meeting, and then we brought Terry with us, who had about 62 days and was living in his car, and looked it, and you see a lot of things in Los Angeles. It's a very diverse place, but you don't often see a woman with a ashen cross on her head, an Orthodox Jew, and a homeless guy going to an Arab restaurant to eat, unless they're in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, we walked in, and people were looking really uncomfortable, and like, and Hamid, oh, hello, come on, Israel, sit down, and we all broke bread together. That is Alcoholics Anonymous, that really is. I love that about our fellowship. I just absolutely love that. I love the life that you have given me here. It is really, when I can stop and recognize it, it is the life that I always wanted. Sometimes I can't see it. But when I stop and notice it, because I'm the type of person, like, I could be at Burbank Airport waiting for my flight to come up here thinking, someday I'll travel to places and meet new people and get to, go off on weekend trips, and then I'll have to, oh, wait, I'm doing that right now, but I'll miss that whole thing because I'll be thinking about how someday I'll do that. Anyway, let me get drinking here. I grew up in Santa Cruz, wherever that is from here, somewhere, into an alcoholic home, for whatever that's worth. And I'm not, I'm an alcoholic because I drank too much, and I have an unnatural reaction to alcohol. I guess to a certain extent, though, I do think we're products of our environment. And I used to think I had this really sad childhood on kind of an epic scale, and but, being around here long enough, I've been brought down to right size. And you know what? I grew up in a lovely, lovely place with blue sky over my head, and there's a lot of love in that home. But, there was alcoholism in that home, but it wasn't all that tragic. I mean, we were, our Christmas lights stayed up all year, our garbage cans were out all week, that type of stuff. Sometimes, the cops would bring my dad home. Lots of broken windows at our house. I always tell the story about how the glass man had been there for like the third time in a week fixing a broken window. And as he was leaving, he stuck his head back in the front door and he said to my mom, "Lady, you are the captain of a strange ship." And that kind of was life at our house. And she really was. It was what it was. My father was a trucker. He a truck driver and a hard hat, and although he was, that was never his plan, but that's kind of the way his life. He never he to this day has not found it necessary to come here. A lot of other people have found it necessary for him, but he hasn't. But my mom, on the other hand, he'd be gone for long stretches of time, and there was just kind of always kind of chaos and so on. And my mother was the one that kind of held it all together, with these 4 children, and she was a librarian there in Santa Cruz, but she would certainly have her breaking points. And this is another story I'd love to tell about my mom, that there was a leaky faucet at the library, and they weren't fixing it, and it kept dripping, and one day she just snapped, and she called down to City Hall and said, if you don't get someone here to fix this leaky faucet, I'm going to run nude down Woodrow Avenue with a sign around my neck that says I work for the city of Santa Cruz and I've been driven mad by a leaky faucet. So this is kind of my gene pool here, but and I was this intense, fearful child, but Alcoholics Anonymous was working in my life long before I ever picked up a drink. My debt to Alcoholics Anonymous is huge. My grandfather was sober in this program, and when my father left, I think I was about 10 or 12 or so, I'm not sure. He didn't go far though. He just went down the street with another woman and her kids, and only in AA is that funny. But I love that. I don't want to, you have given me freedom. You have given me so much freedom, because we bring that stuff in here and we laugh about it. I mean, there's nothing. Have you ever been to an AA memorial? And the normal people, they're normie, the family is there, and then you have the AAs, and they're getting up like, yeah, I went and picked him up on Skid Row, and all his teeth were knocked out. We're like, and they're just like, oh my God. But that's joy. We're in the lifeboat. We're in the lifeboat, and it's just that like joy. And I'm so grateful. I don't want to carry all that stuff around. Anyway, so my dad was nearby but gone, and it was my grandfather who, my mom on a librarian salary with 4 kids. I know that my older siblings went to work and helped out, and my grandfather helped my mom to make the house payments and put braces on my teeth and paid tuition so I could stay in the Catholic school that I went to and that type of stuff. And I know it was because he was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and had he not been sober, my life would have been very, very different long before I ever started drinking. I did go to Catholic school, as I said. I don't mean to offend anyone here, but I loved Catholic school. That's just my experience. I don't think I'm recovering from that experience. I'm very grateful for the education that I received there, and I had really good examples of people around me living lives of meaning and purpose. And some of the concepts here about love and service, they were not new concepts to me, and they were ones that I had gotten away from, and I'm glad that you showed me how to get back to them. But my faith was important to me, and I loved what went on in that school and in that parish, and it was important to me. And I bring that up because that was one of the first things that had to go when I started to drink and use, because I couldn't reconcile, the actions I was taking as a drunken teenager with the tenets of my faith, and that was a very difficult thing. Anyway, I can just tell you, when I graduated from the 8th grade, that school went up to 8th grade, and my mom, I'm the youngest of 4. I had I came out in the kitchen, my mom had my diploma, and I'd won some little pins and stuff, and she said to me, Ken, I finally got my scholar. And it might have been about a year later, a year and a half, I'd started to drink by this time, and just to kind of give you an idea of, where drinking took me and how quickly. And my mom was in front of me again. At this time, I was behind the counter at the DeWinter Schnitzel where I was working. I had dropped out of high school with a 0.8 GPA, and I was working at the DeWinter Schnitzel full time, and my mom was there because I hadn't been home the night before, and maybe not the night before that, and she was standing there and trying not to cry and saying to me, I don't understand what's happened to you. You used to be so active, and what she meant was like in our parish and stuff. And I didn't understand it either. It's clear to me now. I'm one of those alcoholics. I took the drink and the drink took me. But I didn't understand it then, and I had to defend my right to drink, and so I didn't know I was doing that at the time. But I said the things that we say: get out of here, leave me alone, you don't care, you don't love me, that type of stuff. And and I never intended to to treat my mother that way, and that certainly didn't make me feel good, but, I had to do what I had to do. And I can remember one morning, I would never, when I would go out the night before, the day before, it was never an I'll stay out for a couple days and then hide out while I watched my mom drive all over town frantically looking for me, or, that was never the plan, but that would often happen. And I'd been out all night, and my mom hadn't gone to work yet, and I just could not go in there and face her. And so, some guy was dropping me off, and I was in the clothes the night before and sick and shaking, and I had him drop me off around the corner, and I sat on the curb, and I shook and shivered, and she finally went to work, and I went into the kitchen, and there was a note from her on the refrigerator that said, "Don't you realize what it does to me when you do this?" And of course I did, but I was powerless to stop, and it seemed like my friends could just party on the weekends and end up back in school, and I wasn't able to do that. And I thought, well, maybe it's this town, it's my friends. It didn't occur to me that it was me, and I decided that I would, I took my first geographic. I guess I was 15 or 16, and I went off to Honolulu. My sister Brianna was living there, also practicing our disease, and she was raising my nephew alone. She was 19, and off I went and moved in with her, I enrolled in a high school just long enough to kind of meet the people that drank like I did, and things did not get any better there. In fact, they got worse. We're having some technical difficulties. I can't look. I cannot look. Let me stop the tape for a minute. Okay. We ended up losing our apartment. These two, when I think about how young that is, 19 and 15, and my little baby nephew, and we stayed on friends' couches and stuff for a while, and we finally got an apartment, and it was just for me, it was just a horrible, just not a good time, and I was drinking a lot, and to make matters worse, I got drunk and I got pregnant in that order, and I terminated that pregnancy, and I'm not here to moralize about that for anybody but me, but it had been maybe not even a year before that I'd been confirmed in the Catholic Church, and that faith was very important to me, and not even a year into my drinking, I find myself having to drink to cover up the things I had done as a result of my drinking, and I was on that merry-go-round, and I decided that Hawaii is the problem, and I'll get back to California, and it'll all be all right, it'll all be different. Back in California, it'll be yet another fresh start, and I went, and this is when my restaurant career started there at the Der Wiener Schnitzel, I didn't know that I was going to work in restaurants for the next 17 years and the first 11 years of my sobriety. And, there's nothing wrong with doing that kind of work, but I was never happy doing it, and it was just going to be a temporary thing until my real life started. There's an old-timer in my home group, Mary Ann King, who says she never knew the difference between a fantasy and a plan. And, boy, that just, that fits me. At any rate, I'm back to California. I go. I'm working at the Der Wiener Schnitzel, and I think I enrolled back in another high school, but that didn't last long. And around this time, I met him, and we all know who he is. One of those Mr. Rights. He's currently Mr. D85602 to the warden at Soledad, but it's sorry. I'm a teacher. Teachers like tissues. I'm going to put it up my sleeve when I'm done. No. Remember how they used to do that? I know. TMI. I'm sorry. I'm giving you way too much information. Anyway. Okay. So I hook up with him, and you know what? In my dates, we're starting to say things like, "You smell like a brewery," and "What are those flash marks on your wrist?" And my mom says, "You can't come over anymore." And my friends are pissed because you drove into their car. And he didn't say any of that stuff, and it was on. He woke up with the shakes like I did, and if I came to and threw up in his plant, that was not a big deal at all, and it was great. But he didn't work much, and so I'm stealing from the Der Wiener Schnitzel, and things were I ended up losing that job. I think I quit just before I was fired, which is, I don't know. I guess even Der Wiener Schnitzel has standards, but that's pretty. I was drunk, and I showed up there. I've been drinking on the beach all day, and I got into a little altercation with another employee in the parking lot, and we were rolling around in the pavement out there. And then I ran through the back door and made a scene behind the counter. It was just hideous. And so I had to go to the Great American Wiener Works and get a job, and they served beer, and so, that was a step up as far as I was concerned. But it wasn't very long that now I'm loading cases of beer out the back door and that type of thing. And that things just seemed like things got crazy quickly. I was, drinking all the time, and thank you very much, Victoria. That relationship was getting really violent, and I didn't know how to get away from that. And I had this car, and that was, I've had some kind of nice things happen to me in sobriety and some accomplishments and so on. And but some of the things, I got that car, and I didn't even know how to drive when I got it. But of course, no driver's license, no registration, no insurance. I just couldn't figure out how people did that kind of stuff. My car is back at Burbank Airport, and it only has 3 hubcaps, and it's kind of dirty and stuff, but there's current tags on it, and they're mine. I didn't have to get a razor blade and scrape them off somebody else's. And I have a license to drive it with my current address in there, and an insurance card that's current to drive that car. And that's some of the stuff, it talks about that in the Satisfactions of Right Living, about service gladly rendered and obligations squarely met, that these are the satisfactions of right living. And I have found that to be so true for me today. Because, I thought that freedom was in having no responsibility, and that's why I was always, I cannot figure out how to get a driver's license, but I'm really good at getting on a plane with dark glasses and a hangover with a one-way ticket, and getting out of there. And people used to say to me, because I would run off, I went off to Hawaii, to China at one point, and not a good idea. Don't go behind the Iron Curtain for any practicing alcoholics out there, but it sounded like a plan at the time. And people would say, "Oh, you're so brave," and it's absolutely the opposite. It's because I'm terrified. I'm terrified, and I can't stay still and let you know that I don't know how to do the things that other people seem to know how to do. And I learned that here, and I learned it in the strangest ways, by doing things like keeping a commitment at all the meetings I go to. I didn't know the big secret to life was showing up, but I had to learn that here first. We have a saying in my home group that you're at that Wednesday night meeting unless there's a death in the family and it's yours. I mean, and that has worked for me because I am a runner. I don't finish anything, but I learned how to do stuff here in the simplest, what does setting up chairs have to do with my life? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with my life, because I just learned that in spite of how I feel, I do what I've been asked to do, and that has taken me through many, many things. Anyway, where was I? I had this car, and I crashed it in a blackout, and within this week, I was beaten up really badly by this guy, and that was just getting crazier. And I found myself looking through the newspaper the next day, and my blackouts were not so cute anymore, and I was looking to see if I'd hit anyone or killed anyone, if the police were looking for anyone. I didn't, to this day, I don't know, what I hit. And I drove back across town where I thought I went, and because there was pieces missing off the car, and looked for the pieces of the car. And, within a few days, I had left that car in my mom's garage, let her deal with it, shut the door on it, and bought a one-way ticket back to the place I said I'd never go back, to Honolulu. I had just turned 18. I got a job in a bar. Drinking age was 18 then, and I just thought that it was the most glamorous career move that I had ever made. We had $1.50 drinks and 4 bands a day and 2 Elvis impersonators, and I got to wear this little tiny black cocktail waitress uniform. I just thought I had really arrived. 6 years later, when I was still working there, I didn't feel quite the same way, and I went back to Honolulu December before last, actually to run the marathon, and I went back to that bar, and 2 of those bands are still playing there. I want you to know, just in case anyone wants to go to the Cox Roost. Anyway, but you know what? So there I am, and it was going to be another fresh start for me. But you know what? I'm just crossing those lines, and I got involved with a married man, one of the Elvis's bass players, and that was a big disaster. And by the time I was 19, I was on my 4th abortion. And how would that happen? And you know what? I swear to you, I'd never planned on living that way. I'd never planned on living that way. And I am now so far removed from any kind of God of my understanding, or what I think is being able to redeem a life like that. You know, I did not think that there would be any way. I mean, the guilt and the remorse and the shame. And, those are some of the big stuff. But then there's all the little ways that we sell out, the nickel and dime stuff that we do that leaves us, with no integrity, and the lies of all the times that I, couldn't go to work because of alcohol poisoning, or just too hungover, and just all the ways that we chip away. And, I can just say that I ended up living in an apartment that was much like the house I grew up in. In fact, the first phone call I made to you was from a pay phone in front of a liquor store, because our phone was cut off, and I couldn't go in that liquor store anymore because I'd been drunk and profane, and I don't think I was 86, but my pride was not going to let me go in there. And when I couldn't go, I didn't drive after I totaled that car. I wanted this big, broad, colorful life, and my life just got smaller and narrower until it became just, this life really reduced to its smallest dimensions. I mean, that's really, it was so circumscribed by my alcoholism, this teeny tiny little life. I didn't drive anymore, and that when I couldn't go in that liquor store, the next closest liquor store meant that I had to scramble across this freeway off-ramp and go up the embankment and cut through a hole in a chain-link fence to go to the liquor store. And it never occurred to me that there was anything unusual about that. That's where the liquor store is. What's the big deal? The last couple years of my drinking, I drank in the strip bars, or what we called the Korean bars, the hostess bars in Honolulu, because we seek lower companions. I did not work there, and believe me, it's just because I didn't have the self-esteem by the time I landed there to ask for a job. But, I could look at those women and think, well, at least I'm not doing that. And those bars are really, really dark, and the booths are really high. I could drink and be left alone, because when other bars, people want you to do things like dance and have a conversation, and that stuff just cuts into my drinking time. I was at that point where just a few drinks and I'd be slurring and stuff, but I'd be really sober on the inside, but not on the outside. And, and I just couldn't go to the clubs where some, doorman would have to put me in a cab and send me off. It was just too humiliating. And, what can I say? I mean, my days would go like this. I'd come to around 3 in the afternoon and hopefully have enough cocaine from the night before to kind of get through this terrible, terrible hangovers. And I would just stand over the sink and try and keep water drops on my tongue, and my head would just race, and that feeling of impending calamity always would be on me. And my head would just spin, just normal people don't do this, normal people don't do this. It would just, and I'd try and kind of get it together and get in a taxi cab with a hat pulled down over my eyes to get to my connections, to get to the bar that I worked at, to get through my shift, to get to the bars that I drank at. And I used to get, the bars are open until 4 a.m. there, and they reopen at 6 a.m., but I used to worry about the 2 hours of downtime in there, and I had a little routine but the liquor store stopped selling at midnight. You know how it's very tricky? I think they do that on purpose. and so I'd run downstairs from the bar I worked at. There's a liquor store down there. I'd get a couple little airplane bottles of vodka to keep with me just in case I wasn't where I needed to be between 4 and 6 a.m., and not social drinking, I guess. And I was about 84 pounds by the time I got to you. I was 22 years old. My hair was falling out. My gums were receded from malnutrition. I'd been hearing voices and things crawling on my skin, and I was in that untenable place where I did not know if alcohol was taking me to crazy, if it was keeping me from going there, that married boyfriend of mine was starting to not want to come over anymore because of the way that I lived, and I just thought he was paranoid. We had this huge wet spot by the front door. That was a problem. And now I know you call a plumber, but that was a little more than I could handle, and that spot just got bigger, and I just got better at jumping over it. There was some sort of a leak under there, and this apartment had louvered windows, and the bottom 6 or so were broken out, and it was by the city bus yard in this vacant lot, and there were all these wild cats that lived near there, and the cats would come through those broken windows, and they'd spray all over and be in the house, and I'd just come home and get out the cats and leap over the wet spot and pass out on the living room floor, and I just did that night after night after night. And my boyfriend came over one afternoon, and I had some stitches on my ankle, and I'd been drunk at the hospital the night before, and the next day I was kind of just in pain and stumbling around, and he said to me, look at your ankle, and that place where the stitches were was just black with fleas, and I dine out on that story a lot, but it's an image that I want to keep really fresh in my mind, because if I ever think there's any glamour left in a cocktail for me, that's the way that I lived as a practicing woman alcoholic, and doing stuff like this is great, but AA is not always convenient, and if I ever think that I don't, want to go to the Pomona Alano Club on a Friday night in traffic, or answer my phone, or do any of the other things that we're asked to do around here, I want to keep that image really fresh in my mind, because I don't ever want AA to get in the way of the good life that it gave me, because it truly has. That day came for me, and just absolutely nothing was working. Just nothing was working, and we used to keep a bottle of vodka in the freezer, and I was pulling on that, and I just, the voices and my skin crawling and all that, and I started to pray that day. It was just a new level of desperation, and I think that prayer led me to the payphone at the liquor store. I had nobody really in my life. I called one of my bosses at the bar, and we drank together, and he always was kind of sympathetic, and he came over, and he said, you need a drink. Let's go get a drink. I was sick and shaking, but I said, no, take me to the hospital, and I don't know, why I said that, but that's what I said. And he took me to the emergency room, and, I know what I wanted there, maybe some Valium and some sympathy, in that order. Give me the Valium first, and then while I'm waiting for it to kick in, you can tell me, how sad it all is. And I got neither. First, I saw a nurse, and I said to her, I can probably stop the cocaine, but I can't stop drinking. I can't stop drinking. And my secret was out, and she said to me, my boyfriend's an alcoholic, and he goes to AA. And my journey really began there. It was not one alcoholic relating to another, but I admitted that I was powerless and my life was unmanageable. And then I saw a doctor who I thought was very mean, and he said, you know what, you're an alcoholic, and we cannot help you, and here are some phone numbers, which were to treatment centers, and goodbye. And I couldn't believe it. I was so offended. 3 years later, when I was still sober, I ran into him, and I thanked him because, a little prescription, a little something to soothe my nerves, or, something like that, it might have been an entirely different story. And I am really grateful and now I realize it's not that he didn't care. I'm glad he didn't medicalize my problem, and it's not necessarily that he didn't care. He didn't have an answer, and he knew he didn't have an answer, and he gave me referrals to where an answer was. And as a result of those phone numbers, I called treatment centers, and I found myself in my first AA meeting. I did not come here and feel like I was home. I would see you guys laughing and talking and smiling, and I would think, I will never look like that. I will never have that light in my eyes. I will, never be comfortable in my skin like that. But I did a couple things right, just a couple. One of them was that I got a home group. As I mentioned, that was the Steps to Freedom group. They still meet on Tuesday nights in Honolulu. And I went there every Tuesday night. And they used to say a lot in those days, hang with the winners. And that ended up happening for me because those people, all those winners came and sought me out because I was a newcomer in AA. And all those people are still sober today. Penny knows many of them. And in that group, they talked about the steps, and they talked about sponsorship, and they talked about getting into service. And I was just kind of carried along. And eventually I got a sponsor, and it was as scary as those early days of sobriety were. It was, in some ways, finding my way back to God was very easy because it was so clear to me that I was living in a state of grace. It was just, I'd wake up and I couldn't believe it in those, I remember going to central office to buy a big book when I had 17 days, and I could have gotten it at a meeting, but I wanted to show my sincerity. And so I went to the central office, to the headquarters, and said, I'd like to buy a big book. And they said, are you new? And I said, no, I have 17 days. And and I still don't think it's that funny because, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And so it was obvious that I had been restored to sanity, and there was something was working in my life. It was obvious. And in Bill's story, and I stole this from my friend Clint, he won't mind, Bill says how God's impact on him was sudden and profound. And sometimes I think we wonder, well, where's, he had this amazing spiritual experience, and where's mine? And I have to remember, on September 23rd, 1985, I could not drink. And on September 24th, 1985, I did not pick up a drink, and I haven't until this day. And God's impact on me was sudden and profound, and it continues to be. I I did that fourth and fifth step, and I was just so afraid of that, and I don't recommend waiting. I probably didn't do it until well into my first year, maybe the beginning of my second year. But I finally got so uncomfortable and carrying all those secrets around, and I didn't get what I wanted from that. AA has really brought more of an incremental revolution to my life. Not that I wanted to come in here and be fixed, and it doesn't quite work that way. I thought there'll be Ben-Hur music, and the sky will open up, and all these wonderful things. But I think it's the doctor's opinion where he says that alcoholics are in full flight from reality, and so often my fantasy version can never compete with the real version. But I'll tell you, there's an Al-Anon that I love, Vinoy Shah, and she says that every alcoholic woman has that little piece of white velvet in her that's never been touched, and that's what that fifth step does for us, and for us women and us Catholic girls, I think that's kind of a big deal. And I felt like after I did that, I could take a light and I could shine it inside of me, and I didn't have to be afraid of what I was going to uncover. And I could start to look you in the eye, and you could look me in the eye. And more importantly, I felt like a member in good standing of Alcoholics Anonymous. I began my life here, and when I had about 3 years of sobriety, I moved to Los Angeles, and I was told by the old timers in Honolulu, it's a huge fellowship. There's 2,000 meetings a week, and you should, you could really fall through the cracks there, so make sure you get a home group right away and a sponsor right away and get connected. And that sounded good, but I was busy. I had a plan, and I'd forgotten some of those things because I thought those things like listen for the similarities and not the differences, that was just for the new people, and after all, I had 3 years now and they couldn't mean me, and I just got into a dangerous place for an alcoholic, and that's judgment. Because wherever you get sober, that's AA for you, right? They did it differently in Los Angeles than they did it in Honolulu, and I couldn't hear the message because all I could, I was just focusing on the differences, and I really just floundered for a while. I was sponsorless for about a year and a half. I do not recommend this to anybody. I would just go to meetings when the heat was on, and I was, I had hooked up with some old friends, in Santa Cruz, and I was going up north a lot and visiting them. A couple of them were junkies, and just really was not doing well. And I had a couple AA contacts in my life, and one of them was my roommate, and he had heard this woman speak, Karen Garrison, who I think is going to speak in July in Stockton, or August, coming up. And she's going to be up here soon. Some of you may know Karen. And he heard Karen speak, and he said, why don't you ask this woman to be your sponsor? And I knew that I needed a sponsor, and I knew that I was in trouble, because one more time I was coming to meetings, and it was just like when I was new again. I'm on the outside of AA looking in, and I'm looking at you guys laughing and talking and smiling and think, I'm never going to feel that way. I'm not going to be comfortable in my skin like that. I'll never have that light in my eyes. They say here to get in the middle of the herd, and I think that's a really good idea. I have seen AA from the fringes, and I've seen it from the middle, and the view is very different depending on where you're standing. And, in nature, the ones on the outside, ones that of a herd are the ones that get picked off, and I am really at my best, and every good thing in my life has happened when I've been right in the middle of you. And today I just like to keep a lot of bodies between me and that door. It's just a good place for me to be, because I know what it feels like to be in both places. Anyway, I just knew that I really wasn't doing well, and I asked Karen to sponsor me, and I had no time to interview. I was as desperate as almost 5 as I was on day 1, and maybe more so, because I knew that, I didn't know that I would have a relapse in me. That was not something that I can consider as an option, and I met with her, and I told her all these problems I'd acquired in the year and a half that I was sponsorless, and there were many. And she responded rapidly, as she's wont to do, for those of you that know Karen. She said, honey, I expect a lot from the people I sponsor, and with your amount of sobriety, I'd like you to go to 4 meetings a week and get commitments in all of them, and I want you to start answering phones at our central office. I'd like you to get a panel, get involved with H&I. I want you to start sponsoring women and get involved with the women I sponsor, your AA sisters. I'd like you to do another 4th and 5th step with me, and I'd like you to call me on a regular basis. And I thought, I have picked the wrong sponsor here. I thought, did she hear me? What? Because her solutions had nothing to do with my problems at all. And, of course, I couldn't tell you today what any of those problems were. They absolutely died of neglect, which... And you know what? She knew exactly what to do with me. I had had about a year and a half of the KENNA show, and it was all I could stand. And she knew that, and I had no foundation in Southern California AA. I was just a lone wolf. And she knew that all that stuff was going to get me in the middle of the room, and it was going to build a foundation under me and a fellowship around me. And that's been true, and it's a foundation I stand on today, and a fellowship that holds me up today, because I started to do all that stuff. And when I got busy, I got better. I mean, that's just been the experience. Has been my experience. She wanted, and I started doing all that stuff. I had a prison panel for about 4 years, and I started to get to. Of course, it was about a 120-mile round trip, and so you're spending a lot of time with other A's in the car, and you're getting to know people, and I, that's one of my favorite things about the life I have here now is that knowing people a lot of different places. I love that, and answering phones in central office, and I had heard many speakers talk about that first call they made to AA. I know I made it, and the voice that answered the phone and what they heard in that voice. And I swear I never once picked up that phone and said Alcoholics Anonymous without being aware of what an honor it was to be on the right end of the phone and to get to be that voice. That fifth step I did with Karen, one of the things that came out on that was I was really ashamed of the fact that I only had an 8th grade education. I was still waiting tables, and I felt, so stuck here. And she said to me, Kenna, you can have anything you want here as long as you're willing to do the work to get it, And that was the thing I didn't want to hear, was that second part, doing the work to get it. Because by now, LA is filled with speaker meetings, and I'm in these speaker meetings, and, in a 40-minute pitch, I mean, you're just getting the cliff notes. You're getting all the high points, And I hear people like my friend Clint, I was living in a garage, and now I'm a lawyer. And she's like, oh, my God, if I come to enough meetings, I'm going to be a lawyer, too. This is great. But... she pointed out, no, God only does for us what we can't do for ourselves, and you have to do the rest. And that was, I didn't want to hear that. And it is true. You don't hear, that the stuff that's hard. I'm good at big dramas, but the day-to-day trudging, that's hard for me. And I'm not really happy to tell you this with 18 years that sometimes, when my alarm goes off, I don't leap out of bed and fall to my knees and say, oh, boy, it's going to be another day and with new challenges and opportunities for growth. That, that is not my reaction to life. My alarm goes off and I just think, damn it. And that's usually my first thought, and I hit snooze a few times, and then I'm conscious enough to start thinking, what can I get out of? What can I call in sick for? And when's my next nap? That's just, I have to live, much of what I do in Alcoholics Anonymous is living contrary to my nature. It really is. It's taking those contrary actions. But it's pretty good on the other side when I can just keep trudging. Karen suggests, she said, why don't you go and get your high school diploma, take the GED exam, try and do that. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's going to change my life. Yeah, good one. Oh, but, of course, I didn't say that. And there's that one I thought, well, that I can't pass. And then the other side of me was like, well, GED, how about, a PhD? But I just, I went. That was in 92, I remember, because the riots happened in that time. And then we were on curfew, and so it was interrupted for a while. And I wasn't going to finish. I wasn't going to go back and finish. But I'd been coming back to meetings long enough and doing those stupid commitments she had me do and hearing enough people saying, you suit up and you show up and you do this no matter what, that I thought, I guess finish what you started. And I finished. I went back and did that when the curfew was lifted. And I did it with another member of my home group, and that's another thing that has been so invaluable to me here. There's always somebody else in the room that you can do it with, or that has done it, or then you can reach back and help them do it. And, much to my surprise, I passed at 28 years old. I became a high school graduate. And I didn't even know that was really a big deal for me. I had just kind of written that off as wreckage of the past. And it turned out to be a really good thing for me. And I started taking a class, started with one class, and I went to school the way I heard people here go to school, that you get there early, you show up every day no matter what, you ask questions, you sit in the front. And I did that. I started with one class. I was at a little community college in Pasadena. And I was there for about 3 years. And by the time I left there, I had 3 little jobs at that college, and they weren't big deals. They were like $6 an hour filing and tutoring and stuff. But I was 29 years old when I got that first job there, and that was my first job above minimum wage and beyond, physical labor, like something out of the restaurant business. And that was a really big deal to me. And I was able to cut back on my shifts at the restaurant. And the one thing I did right was I just showed up. I showed up every day, no matter what. I showed up on the days I was too dumb and on the days I was too smart, and every day in between, which was, like one day, right? Because it's always, one or the other. And I remember running into a friend of mine on campus, and we were talking about that as alcoholics, what it's like for us to go to school. And I said, well, you know how it is. I have to get an A just so I feel like I can, take a seat in the classroom. And he said, oh, I have to get an A just so I can feel like a piece of crap. And I thought, yeah, that's us. And I just put one foot in front of the other, and I didn't go in there with any big plan, because that was not the first community college I'd been to. It was the third, and I'm really good at making these big plans, and then they don't work out, and see, I knew it, forget it. And Karen would just say, honey, just do the next indicated action, just do what's in front of you. And so that's what I would do. And a plan developed. And I used to think, I can't go to school. I don't know anything, or I don't know what I want to do. And I later learned that's exactly what schools are designed for. And eventually a plan developed, and I wanted to go to university and eventually go on to graduate school and teach community college. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And I wanted to go to UCLA, but I could not meet their math requirement. And I took the same math class 3 times, and I was there for an extra year taking math and failing, and tutors and math anxiety tapes and everything you can think of. But I had learned here about doing footwork, and so I went and had myself tested for a learning disability. I was actually tutoring someone who had those services, and he told me about it. And so I went and I was tested for a learning disability, and I was told that I would not have a university education, that I did indeed have a really severe learning disability in math, and that I should maybe consider a non-vocational school or a non-accredited college. But nobody in AA told me that, and my sponsor didn't tell me that. She said, honey, you just keep knocking on doors and just keep trying. And as an educator today, I understand that they did not mean me any harm there. There's just often a lot of misinformation out there. And against the advice of the learning disability doctor and my counselor, I applied to UCLA. It's a good thing I got in, because it was the only school I applied to. That was the best. I didn't know about admissions requirements and number. It's just, and of course I got it in like 11:59, as right as the windows. And I'm like, that's how I did everything. But I did it. That's the main thing, I guess. And in June of 1997, I put on a cap and gown for the first time in my life. I was 33 years old and 11 years sober, and I graduated from UCLA. And I got to give the commencement address at that graduation, and that was really probably one of the best thing about that day really was that my mom got to sit in the VIP section, and she had her scholar back, and that was really absolutely just a gift from you guys. And I got to go to this VIP reception where they had all the professors who are participating and the speakers. There was one of Clinton's ambassadors to the Middle East, Dennis Ross, and they dressed them in they call it a robing ceremony, and they dressed them in their academic regalia, and I got to bring my guest, who was my sponsor, Karen, at the time. Now, this is a woman who came out of a blackout walking naked down a highway. And and this other old-timer from my home group, Don Newcomb, who did 27 years in the penitentiary. And I, not that long, about 17 or something like that. And anyway, I thought, God, if they only knew. But, hey, I put a lot of expectations on that degree. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, and I thought, once, kind of like that first 4-step, once I get that degree, I'll be confident in everything I do, and I'll have some wonderful job, and I'll never, I'll be serene, and life will be a bed of roses. And it has been great going to school, but guess what? It's not a cure for alcoholism. And I have to remember that the forces that brought me here are still very much with me, and I have to respect the fact that I have a disease and treat it accordingly. And that was a little disappointing, I have to admit, to realize, and I just really floundered for a while, I think, because I did put some expectations on that degree, and I wanted to take a year off and just work, and then I was going to go to graduate school. And you know, when you're in school and people say, well, what are you going to do when you're out? And you're like, well, I'm going to teach for a year and go to graduate school. But you never really think you're going to finish, and so you just say that. But then I really did finish, and then I had to do what I said I was going to do, and I was terrified, just terrified. And I was praying, you know, God, where should I serve and what should I do? And I just, you know, all I really knew was waiting tables and just really having a hard time. And I was doing things like house sitting for people in the program and stuff like that. And I finally got this little job teaching phonics to kindergartners, and I was just so afraid, and with good reason. I mean, they say things like, is that your real hair? Because you look like you have some other hair underneath. You know, you're like... Thank you. You know, and this friend of mine in the program is telling me, you know what, we really need a teacher. It's special ed, middle school, LA Unified, down in Gardena. Why don't you come and take the job? I'm like, no middle school. Remember when you were like 13, 14? No special ed, no LA Unified, please. And where's Gardena? None of the above. But then, you know, I would just, oh, God, where should I serve? What should I do? And, you know, she was on me for like literally it was about 5 months, you know, and just leave me alone. And every other door was closed. And this was the only thing. And no. And, you know, I didn't know that God did such a good impression on my friend Lisa. And then I made the fortunate or unfortunate mistake of mentioning that job to my sponsor. My sponsor by that time was Marion, and I said, you know, there's this one job I can get, but it's special ed middle school and for LA Unified. Nobody wants those jobs, which is true, and that's why I can get the job. And I felt this frost come over the phone, you know, that sponsor frost. And she said, you know, as the mother of a former special ed student, I think you could really be of service there, and I think you know in your heart that that's where you're supposed to be. And you know, the minute she said that, I did know in my heart that's where I was supposed to be. But that was not the answer that I wanted. And when I'm praying for the fear to be removed, I just want the fear to be removed. Don't send me to 163rd and Normandy to make me walk through the fear. That's not what I meant at all. In some, you know, 3,000 kid out of control middle school. And there's worse schools, but we're, you know, as California ranks their schools on a scale of 1 to 10, 10's the highest, and this is the school is a 2. And so we had a lot of problems. And, you know, and they just hand me the key and said, it's down there, room 5. I mean, that was the extent of my training. You know, and I tried to tell my friend Lisa, I have no experience with teaching special ed. And she said, Alcoholics Anonymous is the best training I've ever had with teaching special ed. But you know what? She has been absolutely right about that. I'll tell you, and I was thinking about, like, doing the H&I work and stuff, because, you know, I mean, a lot of these kids, you know, little gangsters and stuff like that, and they try and mad dog you and all that. But, you know, having that prison panel, I felt pretty well prepared. I mean, I don't know. It was very frightening and very difficult. And these kids have problems. I mean, they had a lot, and I don't just mean, I mean, maybe if they read at 3rd grade level, they were doing good, but that was the least of their problems. I mean, group home kids, all kinds of just abuse. A lot of them have been in the system, just really, you know, living in motel room, just lots of stuff. You know, one boy that comes to mind, I mean, he had no fingers on one hand. His grandmother had burned him off in the stove. The same year, both his parents had been murdered, and he'd been in 7 foster care placements, and then a judge had just returned him to his grandmother, who is now out of prison for burning his fingers off in the stove. I mean, he's talking about problems. I don't just mean, like, you know, and all this stuff shows up in the classroom, you know, and I just thought, my sponsor, like, I can't do this, you know, I cannot do this. And she said, you know what, they gave you the key to that room, and you don't have a cure for that, but, you know, you took that job, yes, you can do it. And believe me, and I did not always do it well. I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer's not going to play me in any movie, but I just thought, you know what do I know best? What do I know? And the thing I know best is Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, when I come to a meeting, the lights are on, the coffee's made, the chairs are set up, you're kind to me, you remember my name. In spite of how crazy I am or what I bring into the room, I know, just like all the craziness, all the different forms of hell that we've come out of, sanity prevails in this room this afternoon. And there's, you know, there's certain things that are always done at meetings that I know are going to be done that are very comforting to me. And I thought, well, I can put that in my classroom. And I try and started trying to look at them the way that you looked at me. when I got here or when I started going to school, and nobody ever said to me, like, how long have you been waiting tables? What makes you think you can go to school? Nobody ever did that. Or the way that we look at a newcomer, no matter how torn up they are, we know there's something bigger here, and I just have to remember that. Like, we're all walking dead. So if I can just use this model, that in the classroom, it'll be all right. And I got through that year, and I just set it up, again, the way that I, the way like you thank me when after somebody reads or something, just little simple things like that, manners, that type of stuff, that turned out, a hand on the shoulder. It just worked out. It worked out really well. But you know what? I had my plan, and my plan was to get that master's degree and teach community college, by God, and so I did that. I went up to Stanford, and I got a master's degree. And I was there for a year, and that was a really great, experience doing that. And I did not get a full-time community college teaching position, but I got a part-time one, and I ended up on the faculty at Pasadena City College, where my sponsor sent me to take one class, and I was in the English department teaching there, and that was a really great experience. But you know what? I found that my heart was at 163rd in Normandy teaching special ed, and I kind of didn't want that to be the case. But when I'm in the classroom, I don't want to be anywhere else. I'm not waiting for my real life to start. I feel comfortable and usefully whole, and so that tells me that's probably where I'm supposed to be. And a lot of that, my plan, I realized, was just ego, because I thought, well, UCLA, Stanford, and then Perry Middle School, home of the Huskies. It just didn't quite have the ring to it. But, and I need to wrap this up. I don't know how. So that that's what I did, and I was there for 4 years. I'm at a new school that this year and closer to home. But in those years, there were lots of problems with supplies and books and all kinds of stuff. One of the things that you do in special ed is behavior modification. You're trying to modify their behavior, and I had this point system, and then the students could shop in the store, and new teachers don't make very much, but it just always seemed like things seemed to work out, and there's a woman here today, Mary Jean, and I was talking at down in the Dominican Republic, and one of the things, a lot of my students live in were in group homes and stuff, and they never have anything of their own, and it's kind of like a big deal to have something of your own. And so, like, I asked when I was speaking to the people, it was a Club Med thing, one of those sober vacation things, if they weren't using like their little lotions and shampoos, if I could, if they would bring those in. Well, I had like 60 pounds of this stuff. And like people were bringing them back, and then they started like coming in from like Texas, and people that like got my address. Stuff was being mailed, and Mary Jean kind of became like the sponsor of our classroom, and for 4.5, 5 years, she lives up here, but that was like one of her ways of doing service, and she supplied for all those children their school supplies, their pens, their pencils, their folders, and it was just like the stuff never ran out. It was, and people knew that they could come to my room, because it was nice. I remember one kid, I finally got him interested in school and stuff, and I knew he was interested because he went to Rite Aid and he ripped off all brand new school supplies. He just stole everything there was. This was a kid who I was trying to get his interest, and I had this cat skeleton, and I was like, "Oh, Albert, look!" And he kind of jumped, and then he's like, "Oh, I've seen one of those before." And I said, "Oh, really, at the museum?" And he said, "No, I was under a house hiding from the cops." And I just thought, teacher's pet, right there, baby. But anyway, it was just, I was able to, provide for them, and that was really Alcoholics Anonymous providing for them. My life is good. It is time for me to stop. It really is. One thing I want to point out, if you're new, again, I want to welcome you, but I just want to say, I got sober, again, you kind of got the highlights, the Cliff Notes version. I got sober in 1985. I didn't get my first college degree until 1997. I got my first, grown-up lady job shortly thereafter. It's don't quit 5 minutes or several years before the miracle happens. it's a lot of it is about, it's just about trudging. I want to finish with something from as Bill sees it, and that is that outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over a seemingly tragic event out of the past, but we have recovered and are helping others to recover, and what greater cause could there be for rejoicing than this? I want to thank you so much for listening, and thank you for my life.